Welcome back everyone. Today we're diving deep into one of the most complex, brutal, and masterfully crafted arcs in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, the Culling Game. This isn't just another tournament arc. This is psychological warfare, strategic manipulation, and existential horror, all wrapped into one devastating package created by one of anime's most terrifying villains, Kenjaku. By the end of this video, you'll understand every rule, every strategy, every hidden layer of this game that turned all of Japan into a massive death arena. So buckle up because we're going on a long journey through one of the darkest arcs in modern shonen manga. But before we begin, let me ask you this. What would you do if you woke up one day with supernatural powers, but using them meant entering a game where you had to kill or be killed? Keep that question in mind as we explore the nightmare that Kenjaku created. The setup, night of October 31st. To understand the Culling Game, we need to go back to where it all started, the Shibuya incident. October 31st was supposed to be a mission to rescue Satoru Gojo from the special grade cursed Jogo and his allies. What our heroes didn't realize was that this was all part of an elaborate plan orchestrated by Kenjaku, the ancient sorcerer who had taken over Suguru Geto's body. The Shibuya incident wasn't just about sealing Gojo, though that was certainly a major objective. No, Kenjaku had a much grander vision. While chaos erupted in Shibuya, while our heroes fought desperately against special grade curses, while Yuji Itadori witnessed horrors that would break most people, Kenjaku was setting the stage for something unprecedented in the history of Jujutsu society. At the climax of the Shibuya incident, Kenjaku performed a ritual using cursed objects he had planted throughout Japan. These weren't ordinary cursed objects. Some of them dated back 1,000 years. Others were created more recently as part of Kenjaku's long-term planning, but all of them had one purpose: to force non-sorcerers to undergo a violent awakening of cursed techniques. Imagine going to sleep as a normal person and waking up with the ability to manipulate gravity, or control shadows, or see curses for the first time. Now imagine that happening to thousands of people simultaneously across an entire nation. The psychological trauma alone would be devastating. But Kenjaku wasn't interested in their mental health, he was interested in their cursed energy. When these cursed objects activated, they fundamentally altered the brains of their hosts. Idol transfiguration, the same technique that Mahito used to transform humans into grotesque curses, was employed on a massive scale, but instead of creating mindless monsters, Kenjaku used it to carve cursed techniques directly into people's brains, forcing their bodies to adapt or die. Many died immediately. Their bodies couldn't handle the sudden influx of cursed energy. Others survived but were driven insane by the ability to suddenly see curses everywhere. But thousands survived the initial awakening with their sanity intact. These people, called players, became the unwitting pawns in Kenjaku's grand design. But Kenjaku didn't just create new sorcerers. He also included ancient sorcerers from previous eras that he had made pacts with over his 1,000-year existence. Sorcerers from the Heian era, the golden age of Jujutsu. Warriors who had honed their techniques to perfection in an age when cursed energy was far more prevalent and understood. These ancient players were given new bodies through cursed objects, effectively resurrecting them into the modern age. This combination of confused modern awakened sorcerers and battle-hardened ancient warriors created a perfect powder keg, and Kenjaku was about to light the fuse. The game begins. The Culling Game rules. On November 9th, 10 days after the Shibuya incident, barriers began forming across Japan. These weren't ordinary barriers, they were colonies, 10 massive areas that would serve as the arenas for Kenjaku's game. Each colony was roughly equivalent to the size of Tokyo's special wards, meaning these were enormous territories. But what made these barriers special was their connection to each other. While appearing as separate areas, all 10 colonies were connected through a network of barriers that formed a specific pattern across the Japanese archipelago. This wasn't random. The positioning of these colonies corresponded to important locations in Japan's spiritual geography, places where cursed energy naturally accumulated. Only Hokkaido was excluded, protected by the barriers of the Jujutsu Society's northern branch. But everywhere else from Sendai to Tokyo to Sakurajima became part of Kenjaku's massive game board. And then the rules were announced. Every player received them instinctively, carved into their consciousness along with their cursed technique. 8 rules that would govern their existence from that moment forward. Let me break down each rule and explain the absolute genius and cruelty behind Kenjaku's design. Rule 1. Declaration of Participation. After awakening a cursed technique, players have 19 days to declare their participation in the Culling Game at a colony of their choice. Seems simple enough, right? You just need to show up and register. But here's the cruel genius. This rule forces every awakened player to make a choice within a limited time frame. Think about it from the perspective of someone who just gained supernatural powers. You're confused, scared, probably hiding from the curses you can suddenly see. You might not even know what the Culling Game is. You might think you can just ignore it and go back to your normal life. But you can't. The clock is ticking. 19 days. That's all you get. This rule also serves a strategic purpose for Kenjaku. By giving players the choice of which colony to enter, he ensures a relatively even distribution of players across all 10 arenas. Some will choose colonies close to their homes. Others might research and try to find the safest colony. This illusion of choice is important. It makes players feel like they have some control over their fate. Rule 2. Removal of curse technique. Any player who breaks Rule 1 will have their curse technique removed. This sounds like a punishment, maybe even a mercy for those who don't want to participate. But the reality is far more sinister. Remember how these techniques were implanted? They were carved directly into the player's brains using idle transfiguration. The technique isn't just something you can use, it's fundamentally part of your brain structure now. Removing it doesn't mean you just lose your powers and go back to being normal. It means your brain is transformed again, but this time without the careful precision of the initial implantation. The result is death. Not a quick death either. Your brain essentially melts as the cursed technique is ripped out of your neural pathways. It's Mahito's idle transfiguration in reverse, and it's just as fatal as his direct attacks. This rule eliminates the possibility of conscientious objection. You can't say I don't want to play and walk away. Your only choices are participate or die. It's a brilliant piece of psychological manipulation because it removes the moral agency from the equation. You're not choosing to kill others because you want to. You're doing it because the alternative is your own death. Rule 3. Automatic entry. Any non-player who enters a colony of their own free will automatically becomes a player. This rule is absolutely diabolical because it turns the colonies into zones of contamination. Imagine a family member trying to enter a colony to rescue their loved one who became a player. The moment they cross the barrier, they're in the game too. This rule serves several purposes. First, it prevents non-sorcerers from entering colonies and disrupting the game. Second, it creates a steady stream of new players to replace those who die, ensuring the game can continue indefinitely. Third, and most cruelly, it means that any attempt at rescue becomes a trap. The phrase "of their own free will" is important here. If someone is dragged into a colony unconscious or against their will, they don't become a player. But the moment they make a conscious decision to enter, even if it's to save someone they love, they're bound by all the rules. This creates a quarantine effect. Families are torn apart. The barriers become borders that cannot be crossed without accepting the possibility of death. It's a way of isolating the game from the outside world while still allowing it to grow. Rule 4. Scoring system players score points by ending the lives of other players. 5 points are awarded for ending a sorcerer or curse user. 1 point is awarded for ending a non-sorcerer. This is where the game's true nature reveals itself. Notice the terminology. Ending lives, not just defeating or removing from the game. Death is the only currency that matters in the Culling Game. You don't score points by knocking someone unconscious or forcing them to surrender. You score points by killing them. The disparity in points between sorcerers and non-sorcerers is also significant. It encourages players to target other sorcerers, rather than hunting down confused civilians who just awakened their techniques. This ensures that the most powerful fighters are constantly battling each other, generating massive amounts of cursed energy through their conflicts. But that 1 point for non-sorcerers serves a purpose too. It means that if you're desperate, if you're close to the 19-day deadline and haven't scored any points, you always have the option of targeting someone weaker than yourself. It's a mercy rule designed to keep even weak players in the game. The scoring system also creates a brutal hierarchy. Ancient sorcerers with centuries of experience are worth the same 5 points as a teenager who just awakened their technique last week. This means powerful players are constantly being hunted by groups of weaker players hoping to score big. Rule 5. Point announcement. This rule states that players can check their current point total and ranking at any time through the Game Master. On the surface, this seems like a simple quality of life feature, but it serves important psychological purposes. First, it creates constant awareness of your standing in the game. You always know exactly how close you are to being able to add a new rule or how far you are from the 19-day threshold. This awareness creates pressure and urgency. Second, it gamifies the experience in a way that appeals to human psychology. We're naturally competitive creatures. Seeing a point total and ranking triggers the same neural pathways as video games or sports. It makes the horrific act of murder feel more abstract, more like achieving a high score. Third, it provides information that players can use strategically. If you know you're close to 100 points, you might take bigger risks to reach that threshold. If you know you're far from it, you might play more conservatively. Rule 6. New Rule Addition. Players who have scored at least 100 points can negotiate with the Game Master, Kogane, to add one new rule to the Culling Game. However, any new rule cannot directly prevent players from participating in the game. This is the rule that provides hope. It's the carrot dangling in front of the players, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, you can change the game from within, and it's absolutely central to Kenjaku's design. By allowing rule changes, Kenjaku creates the illusion that players have agency over their fate. You're not just a pawn, you're a participant who can shape the rules. This keeps players engaged and prevents them from simply giving up or trying to escape. The restriction that new rules cannot prevent participation is crucial. You can't add a rule that says everyone can leave or killing is no longer required. The game must continue, but within those constraints, you have surprising freedom. This rule is also what draws our main characters into the game. Yuji, Megumi, Yuta, and others realize that if they can score 100 points, they can potentially add rules that protect non-combatants or create paths to survival that don't require constant murder. It transforms them from victims of the game into active participants trying to subvert it from within. Rule 7. Permission for entry. Players can choose to allow or deny entry to specific individuals into their colony. This rule creates interesting political dynamics within the game. Powerful players can effectively control access to certain areas, creating safe zones or death traps as they see fit. It also prevents players from swarming into whichever colony seems safest or most advantageous. You can't just choose to enter the colony with the weakest players. You need permission from someone already inside. This rule encourages alliance building and negotiation. If you want to enter a specific colony, you might need to offer something in exchange for permission. Information, assistance with scoring points, or simply a non-aggression pact. Rule 8. 19-day inactivity rule. If a player's score remains unchanged for 19 days, their curse technique is removed. Just like with Rule 2, this means death. This is perhaps the most psychologically devastating rule. It means you cannot hide. You cannot find a safe place and wait for the game to end. You must actively participate in killing every 19 days, or die yourself. Think about the pressure this creates. Even if you're a pacifist, even if you hate violence, even if you've managed to avoid combat for 18 days, when day 19 approaches, you have no choice. Kill or die. There's no third option. This rule also ensures a constant churn of deaths. Players who are wounded, traumatized, or simply unlucky will eventually hit that 19-day threshold and be eliminated. It's natural selection enforced by an artificial deadline. The rule creates a rhythm to the game. Every 19 days, there's a spike in violence as players who've been avoiding combat are forced to act. It's like the shrinking zone in a battle royale game, but instead of physical space contracting, it's time itself that becomes the enemy. The colonies. Geography of death. Each of the 10 colonies has its own character, its own population of players, and its own dynamics. Let me walk you through what we know about these arenas of death. Colony 1, located in Tokyo, became one of the most important battlegrounds. This is where Megumi Fushiguro chose to enter, hoping to find and rescue his sister Tsumiki, who had been turned into a player against her will. Tokyo Colony features a mix of modern awakened sorcerers and ancient players, creating chaotic and unpredictable battles. The urban environment of Tokyo creates interesting tactical situations. Buildings provide cover, but also limit escape routes. The dense population means there are always potential targets nearby, but also potential threats. Some players have set up territories within the colony, claiming specific neighborhoods as their hunting grounds. Sendai Colony is notable for housing some of the most powerful ancient sorcerers. This is where Yuki Tsukumo and others discovered that Kenjaku had been particularly selective about which historical figures he resurrected for this game. Warriors from the Heian era who view modern sorcerers as weak and pathetic. Sendai became a meat grinder. The ancient players there treated the game as a return to the glory days of Jujutsu, when strength was the only law and the weak existed only to be crushed by the strong. The cursed energy output from Sendai Colony alone was staggering. Other colonies like the one in Sakurajima, situated around an active volcano, created environmental hazards on top of the human threats. Imagine trying to battle another sorcerer while also avoiding volcanic activity and toxic gases. The environment itself becomes a player in the game. Each colony has a game master called Kogane, a shikigami that looks like a floating cicada. Kogane serves as the interface for the game, allowing players to check points, declare rule additions, and receive information about game mechanics. But Kogane is not neutral. It serves Kenjaku's interests above all else. Kenjaku's true purpose, the merger. Now we need to talk about why Kenjaku created this elaborate death game in the first place. Because despite the complexity of the rules, despite the strategic depth of the colony system, the Culling Game is ultimately just a means to an end. And that end is the merger. Master Tengen is an immortal sorcerer who maintains barriers across Japan, including the protective barriers around Jujutsu High. Tengen's technique requires them to merge with compatible vessel every 500 years to prevent evolution into a higher existence. Riko Amanai was supposed to be that vessel, but Toji Fushiguro ended her life before the merger could occur. Without a compatible vessel, Tengen began evolving. They're still Tengen, still maintaining their barriers and their consciousness, but they're changing into something beyond human comprehension, and this is where Kenjaku's plan comes in. Kenjaku wants to force a merger between Tengen and all of humanity in Japan, not just one vessel, but millions of people simultaneously. This would create something unprecedented, a collective consciousness with cursed energy output beyond anything in history. But such a merger requires astronomical amounts of cursed energy. And where do you get that much cursed energy? By making millions of people fight to the death in a prolonged battle royale. Every technique used in the Culling Game generates cursed energy. Every death releases cursed energy. Every moment of fear, rage, desperation, and determination from the players creates cursed energy. The 10 colonies are essentially cursed energy generators, and the players are the fuel. The specific positioning of the colonies across Japan isn't random either. They're arranged to create a massive ritual circle when viewed from above. The barriers connecting the colonies channel the generated cursed energy towards specific points where Kenjaku can harvest it for the merger ritual. In other words, whether you win or lose individual battles in the Culling Game is irrelevant to Kenjaku. Every swing of your sword, every use of your technique, every drop of blood spilled brings him closer to his goal. The players aren't competing against each other. They're all working together unknowingly to bring about the end of humanity as we know it. The ancient players, warriors from the past. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Culling Game is the inclusion of ancient sorcerers resurrected from previous eras. These aren't just random fighters. Kenjaku specifically chose individuals who would maximize chaos and cursed energy output. Take Hajime Kashimo for example. This ancient sorcerer from 400 years ago is obsessed with finding and fighting Sukuna. Kashimo agreed to participate in Kenjaku's game with one condition. If he survives until the end, Kenjaku must arrange a battle between Kashimo and Sukuna at full power. Kashimo's cursed technique revolves around electricity and cursed energy manipulation at a fundamental level. In his original era, he was known as the strongest of his generation, but that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to fight someone truly worthy, someone who could push him beyond his limits. That's why he sought out Sukuna. But Kashimo's era and Sukuna's era didn't overlap. By the time Kashimo was born, Sukuna had already been defeated and divided into 20 fingers. So Kashimo went through his entire life without ever facing a challenge worthy of his strength. He died unfulfilled, which is why he accepted Kenjaku's offer of resurrection. In the Culling Game, Kashimo is a walking natural disaster. His technique allows him to imbue his cursed energy with properties of electricity, meaning every attack carries both physical and electrical damage. He can move at incredible speeds by riding his own electric currents. And most terrifyingly, he has a one-time use transformation that pushes his body and cursed energy to absolute limits. Then there's Registar, a sorcerer from the Edo period who specialized in creating contracts and manipulating information. His technique, contractual recreation, allows him to manifest anything that has been recorded in a receipt or contract. It sounds like a bizarre ability, but in Regi's hands it becomes devastatingly versatile. Need a weapon? Manifest a receipt for a sword purchase and create it. Need an escape route? Create a receipt for a vehicle rental. The technique's only limitation is Regi's cursed energy and his collection of receipts, and after hundreds of years of preparation, he has receipts for almost everything imaginable. Regi represents a different type of ancient sorcerer, one who relied on cunning and preparation rather than raw power. His battles in the Culling Game are strategic affairs where he constantly adapts to his opponents by manifesting unexpected tools and weapons. Another notable ancient player is Takako Uro, a sorcerer from the Heian era who served as an assassin for the Fujiwara clan. Her technique manipulates the sky itself, treating it as a tangible surface that she can grab, tear, and use as both a weapon and shield. Imagine fighting someone who can reach up, grab a piece of sky like it's fabric, and use it to block your attacks or redirect them back at you. Now imagine that same person can tear holes in the sky to create vacuums or compressed air attacks. Yuro's technique is as beautiful as it is deadly, and her combat style reflects centuries of assassination experience. These ancient players bring several advantages to the Culling Game. First, they have centuries of combat experience. They've refined their techniques to levels that modern sorcerers simply can't match. Second, they come from eras when cursed energy was more prevalent, so they're used to fighting in higher energy environments. Third, and most importantly, they have nothing to lose. Modern players are fighting to survive, to protect their loved ones, to somehow escape this nightmare. Ancient players are already dead. This is bonus time for them. They can fight without fear, take risks that would be suicidal for someone with a future ahead of them. This makes them unpredictable and incredibly dangerous. Our heroes plan, breaking the game from within. So how do our main characters respond to this nightmare scenario? They can't ignore the Culling Game. Some of their friends and allies have been forced to become players. They can't destroy it from outside. The barriers are too strong, maintained by Tengen's power and reinforced by Kenjaku's cursed energy. Their only option is to enter the game themselves and try to break it from within. The plan is elegant in its simplicity. Score 100 points, add new rules that protect non-combatants and create pathways to survival, and eventually accumulate enough rule changes to effectively neutralize the game's lethality. But executing this plan requires our heroes to do the one thing they've been trying to avoid. Participate in the killing. To save lives, they need to end lives. To protect the innocent, they need to score points by eliminating other players. It's a moral paradox that weighs heavily on characters like Yuji Itadori. Yuji enters the Tokyo colony with clear reluctance. His grandfather's dying words were to help people, to use his strength to protect others. But now he's being forced into a situation where protecting some requires ending others. The psychological toll is immense. Megumi Fushiguro has a different motivation. His sister Tsumiki is a player, forced into the game against her will. She's currently in a coma-like state, her body controlled by an ancient sorcerer named Yorozu, who incarnated in her. Megumi's primary goal is to save Tsumiki, which means he needs to find a way to separate her from Yorozu without ending either of their lives. This personal stake makes Megumi more willing to embrace the game's violence. He's not fighting for abstract moral principles, he's fighting for family, and that makes him both more effective and more vulnerable to manipulation. Yuta Okotsu, the special grade sorcerer who studied abroad after the events of Jujutsu Kaisen 0, returns to Japan specifically to participate in the Culling Game. As one of the strongest modern sorcerers, Yuta has the raw power to score points quickly, but he also carries the weight of his past, the memory of Rika, and the curse of love that nearly destroyed him. Yuta's approach to the game is pragmatic. He understands that sometimes you need to work within a broken system to change it. He's willing to play by Kenjaku's rules temporarily if it means eventually subverting them. This makes him an ideal leader for the Culling Game infiltration effort. Kinji Hakari, another powerful sorcerer who was previously suspended from Jujutsu High, also joins the effort. Hakari's gambling-based technique perfectly suits the risk-reward nature of the Culling Game. His domain expansion, Idle Death Gamble, creates a scenario where he's effectively immortal during jackpot sequences, allowing him to take on even ancient sorcerers in direct combat. Hakari represents the chaotic element in the hero's plan. While others are carefully strategizing, Hakari thrives in the unpredictability of the game. He sees it as the ultimate gamble, and he's never been one to shy away from high stakes. The hero's strategy involves several key components. First, identify non-hostile or weakly hostile players who can be convinced to cooperate rather than killed. Every player they can recruit to their cause is one less point for enemy players and one more potential ally. Second, target ancient sorcerers and hostile players aggressively. These individuals are both worth more points and pose the greatest threat to innocent players. By focusing on eliminating the most dangerous combatants, they can reduce overall casualties while scoring points efficiently. Third, communicate and coordinate across colonies. While each colony is separate, players can transfer between them with permission. By establishing networks of allies in multiple colonies, they can share information and resources. Fourth, and most crucially, use rule additions strategically. The first rule change is needed to focus on preventing the worst abuses of the game, protecting non-combatants, creating non-lethal scoring methods, establishing safe zones where combat is prohibited. But every rule addition requires 100 points, which means ending 20 sorcerers or 100 non-sorcerers. The math is brutal. To save hundreds, they might need to end dozens. It's trolley problem ethics on a massive scale. Rule additions, changing the game. As players accumulate 100 points and negotiate with Kogane, new rules begin appearing in the Culling Game. Each rule addition represents both a victory and a compromise, a small change bought with blood that might save lives in the long run. One of the first rule additions proposed by the heroes is Rule 9. Players can access information about other players, including their names, point totals, and current colonies. This might seem like a small change, but it's actually transformative. Before this rule, players were operating blind. You might fight someone without knowing if they're a confused civilian who just awakened last week or an ancient sorcerer with centuries of experience. the information asymmetry favored the strong and ruthless. With Rule 9, players can make informed decisions. You can identify and avoid players who massively outclass you. You can seek out allies based on their point totals and locations. You can track the movements of dangerous individuals. Information becomes a weapon as important as cursed energy. Another crucial rule addition is Rule 10. Players can transfer points to other players. This simple change breaks Kenjaku's carefully designed incentive structure. Under the original rules, every player was competing against every other player. Cooperation was possible, but ultimately everyone needed to score their own points to survive. Rule 10 changes that dynamic entirely. Now a strong player can protect weaker allies by giving them points. A player approaching the 19-day threshold without scoring can receive points from an ally instead of being forced to kill. Groups can pool their points to reach the 100-point threshold faster. This rule transforms the Culling Game from a pure free-for-all into something more complex, a game where alliances and cooperation can compete with individualistic violence as a survival strategy. But here's the brilliant part, even these rule changes serve Kenjaku's ultimate purpose. Whether players are killing each other individually or organizing into factions that fight larger battles, they're still generating cursed energy. The merger doesn't care about the social dynamics of the game, it only cares about the energy output. In some ways, organized warfare between player factions might generate even more cursed energy than random individual combat. Large-scale battles with multiple combatants using high-level techniques simultaneously create massive energy spikes. So even as our heroes think they're subverting the game, they might actually be optimizing it for Kenjaku's purposes. It's a sobering realization that highlights just how thoroughly he's planned this operation. The psychological horror living in the Culling Game. Beyond the physical danger and strategic complexity, the Culling Game is a masterclass in psychological horror. Let's talk about what it's actually like to be a player in this nightmare. Imagine you're an ordinary person. Maybe you're a college student, or an office worker, or a parent. You've never seen a curse before. You don't know anything about Jujutsu society. And then one night, you wake up and the world has changed. You can see things now, horrible things, monsters made of human fear and hatred, and you realize with growing horror that you've always been surrounded by these things. You just couldn't see them before. Then the knowledge appears in your mind like someone carved it directly into your brain. The rules, the game, the 19-day countdown. You have 2.5 weeks to find one of these colony things and declare participation, or you'll die. No explanation, no appeal, just a deadline and a death sentence. So you start looking for information. Maybe you search online and find that thousands of people are experiencing the same thing. Maybe you find a colony location, and now you're faced with the choice: enter the Killing Game or wait to die. Most people enter. The survival instinct is strong. You tell yourself that maybe you can hide, maybe you can avoid combat, maybe someone will figure out how to stop this before you're forced to kill. You're wrong, but hope is all you have. You cross the barrier into a colony and immediately feel the difference. The cursed energy is thick here, almost suffocating. You can sense other players, some close, some far away. Kogani appears and cheerfully explains that you're now officially a participant. Your 19-day countdown to your first kill has begun. The first few days are the worst. You're constantly paranoid, jumping at every sound, interpreting every shadow as a potential threat. You barely sleep. You can't eat. The stress is overwhelming. Then you see your first combat. Maybe you're hiding in a building when 2 other players start fighting in the street below. You watch as they use techniques you can't comprehend, reshaping reality with their cursed energy. You watch as one of them dies, their body broken and bleeding, and you realize that could be you, will be you if you're not careful, if you're not strong enough, if you're not willing to do whatever it takes to survive. The psychological pressure builds as the 19-day deadline approaches. Maybe you've been avoiding combat, hoping someone else will solve this problem. But now you have 72 hours left, then 48, then 24. You start looking at other players differently, not as fellow victims but as potential points. That person over there looks weak. If you had to kill someone, they'd be the easiest target. The thought makes you sick, but you can't stop thinking it. And then the deadline arrives. You have a choice: become a murderer or die. What do? Some people choose death. They refuse to kill, accepting their own end rather than taking another life. These people die believing they've maintained their moral integrity, and maybe they're right. Others rationalize. They tell themselves that it's self-defense, that the game forced them into this, that they'll only kill people who would kill them anyway. They pick a target and they do what they have to do, and then they live with that choice for the rest of their life, however long that might be. The worst part is the normalization. After your first kill, the second is easier. After the second, the third is routine. You start thinking in terms of points and strategy rather than human lives. The game's framing takes over your thinking because that's the only way to stay sane. Some players break entirely. They embrace the violence, treating it as a game in truth rather than just name. These players are often the most dangerous because they've stopped seeing other participants as human. They are just obstacles, points waiting to be collected. The psychological toll extends beyond the individual players. Think about the families outside the colonies. They know their loved one is trapped in there. They can see news reports about the violence, but they can't help. Entering the colony would just make them another victim, so they wait and hope and grieve. Because even if their loved one survives physically, the person who comes out of the culling game won't be the same person who went in. Trauma changes people. Killing changes people. There's no walking away from this experience unchanged. The broader implications. Jujutsu society in crisis. The Culling Game doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a broader crisis that's tearing Jujutsu society apart at the seams. With Gojo sealed, Tengen evolving, and Kenjaku executing a 1,000-year plan, the entire power structure that's maintained the balance between curses and humanity is collapsing. The Jujutsu higher-ups, already corrupt and ineffective, are completely overwhelmed. They can't seal the colonies because the barriers are too strong. They can't evacuate civilians because the colonies cover too much area. They can't send in sorcerers to rescue players because those sorcerers would just become players themselves. So they do what they've always done, make political calculations based on self-interest. Some higher-ups see the Culling Game as an opportunity to eliminate troublesome sorcerers. Others try to negotiate with powerful players to gain allies. None of them are focused on actually solving the crisis. This administrative paralysis forces younger sorcerers to take initiative. Students from Tokyo and Kyoto Jujutsu High step up to fight, knowing that the adults who should be protecting them are either unwilling or unable to act. There's something deeply tragic about watching teenagers shoulder the burden of saving the world because the people in charge have failed. But it's also consistent with Jujutsu Kaisen's themes about institutional failure and the necessity of individual action in the face of systemic collapse. The Culling Game also exposes the fundamental problem with Jujutsu Society's approach to cursed energy. For centuries, sorcerers have operated in secrecy, hiding the existence of curses from the general population. This was supposedly to protect civilians, but it also maintained sorcerers' power and privilege. Now thousands of civilians have been forced to see curses and use cursed energy. The secret is out, and Jujutsu Society has no idea how to handle it. Should they try to integrate these new sorcerers, eliminate them, ignore them and hope the problem goes away? The social implications are staggering. Imagine being a civilian who suddenly discovers that monsters are real, that they've been real your entire life, and that there's been a secret society of sorcerers protecting you without your knowledge or consent. The betrayal would be profound. Some awakened sorcerers will resent the Jujutsu Society for keeping secrets. Others will demand training and support, and Jujutsu Society, already struggling with limited resources, will need to decide how to respond. Kenjaku's plan is destroying not just individual lives but the entire social order that's governed the relationship between curses and humanity. Even if the Culling Game is stopped, even if the merger is prevented, the world has changed permanently. There's no going back to the way things were. The thematic depth, what the Culling Game represents. On a thematic level, the Culling Game is about forced participation in systems of violence. None of the players chose to be there. None of them want to kill. But the structure of the game removes individual choice, replacing it with systematic coercion. This mirrors real-world situations where people are forced into violent systems not because they are inherently violent, but because the alternative is death or destruction. Soldiers conscripted into wars they don't believe in. People forced into criminal activity by economic desperation. Communities trapped in cycles of violence by historical and social forces beyond their control. The game also explores the question of moral responsibility in impossible situations. If someone kills because the alternative is their own death, are they a murderer or a victim? If you participate in an evil system because you're trying to change it from within, are you complicit in that evil or working against it? These aren't abstract philosophical questions in Jujutsu Kaisen. They are immediate dilemmas that characters face. Yuji struggles with the contradiction between his desire to save people and the necessity of ending lives to score points. Megumi grapples with how far he's willing to go to save his sister. There's also a critique of gamification here. The Culling Game takes the aesthetics and mechanics of video games and battle royales and applies them to actual life and death. Points, rankings, rules, strategies, all the elements that make games engaging are here but with real consequences. This raises uncomfortable questions about how we engage with fictional violence. When we play battle royale games or watch tournament anime, we're entertained by the same structures that would be horrifying in reality. The Culling Game forces us to confront that disconnect. Kenjaku's character embodies another major theme, the dangers of treating people as means rather than ends. His entire plan relies on viewing thousands of individuals as fuel, as components in a ritual rather than as people with inherent worth and dignity. This utilitarian calculus, sacrificing some for the supposed benefit of all, is presented as monstrous in Jujutsu Kaisen. Even if Kenjaku genuinely believes that the merger will benefit humanity in some way, the method of achieving it through mass death and suffering renders it unacceptable. The story asks us to consider, are there any ends that justify means this terrible? Can forcing evolution through genocide ever be morally justified? The answer Jujutsu Kaisen offers is a firm no. Conclusion. The game that changed everything, the Culling Game, represents a turning point, not just in Jujutsu Kaisen's plot, but in its entire conception of what a shonen battle manga can be. This isn't a tournament where the stakes are pride or prizes. This isn't a war where the battle lines are clear. This is systematic violence enforced through cursed energy, and everyone involved is both perpetrator and victim. Geiji Akutami created something genuinely disturbing with the Culling Game. It's a scenario where there are no good options, only less terrible ones, where survival requires compromising your values, where the very act of fighting back serves your enemy's purposes. And yet the story doesn't descend into nihilism. Our heroes continue fighting, continue trying to save people, continue believing that change is possible even within this nightmare system. That persistence of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness is what makes Jujutsu Kaisen compelling. The Culling Game arc is still ongoing in the manga as of my knowledge, and its ultimate resolution remains to be seen. Will our heroes succeed in adding enough rules to effectively neutralize the game? Will Kenjaku's merger plan be stopped, or will it succeed? Will the awakened sorcerers find a way to integrate into society, or will they remain outsiders? We don't know yet, but what we do know is that the Culling Game has permanently changed the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. The secrets are out, the barriers between sorcerers and civilians have collapsed. The old order is dead. What emerges from the ashes of the Culling Game will define the future of this story and this world. And that's what makes it such a compelling arc. Not just the immediate tension of survival, but the long-term implications of everything that's happening. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the Culling Game. If you made it this far, you're clearly as obsessed with Jujutsu Kaisen as I am. Let me know in the comments what aspects of the Culling Game fascinate you most. What would you do if you were forced to become a player? How do you think the arc will ultimately resolve? And remember, in a game where the only winning move is to change the rules, the real question isn't how to win, it's whether winning is even possible. Until next time, stay safe, and let's hope we never have to face our own Culling Game.